And so we got in line to go inside St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican. And I walked in and there was the Pietà, like a statue of it. And then you go to the front and there's this little sign that says, "Here lies Peter, the first pope." And I was like, well, there he is. And the person I was with, my fiance at the time, who was also largely agnostic, he was like, "You don't really believe this. Like, what do you, come on, this is Catholicism."
Right.
And in my mind, I was like, I don't actually think I've ever believed anything more in my whole life.
Welcome to Faith After Faith, a podcast that explores the territory between losing your faith and finding it again. I'm your host, Katie Langston. Well, here's something I've come to believe about the modern world. For a couple hundred years now, the West has been running an experiment, and the experiment is, can human beings live in a world that is purely material? A world without God, without spirits, without anything beyond what you can measure. And the results of that experiment, I think, are pretty clear. Most people actually can't live in it. At least not well, and not for long. Human beings are meaning-making animals, and however we end up making our meaning is what we put at the center of our lives. My guest today is Dr. Cristina Gagliano. She is a historian of religion, an expert in Mormon fundamentalism, and the author of Joseph White Musser, a Mormon fundamentalist. She is also a very, very dear friend. Her own faith story has taken her from Pentecostalism in Southern California through agnosticism, through existential dread, and now into a deeply devout Catholicism. She's married to an Anglican priest, which means, as we joke, she has single-handedly resolved the divisions of the Western Church through friendship and marriage. And she was also, when we started recording, very nervous. Her exact words were that she was worried you wouldn't like her. You're gonna like her. Maybe we could start there. Maybe share just a little bit about your own faith background and some of the twists and turns that your religious faith has taken.
Sure. Well, I was raised kind of generally Christian. I mean, culturally Christian, definitely. My mom is non-denominational. My dad was formerly Catholic. He's agnostic.
Yeah.
So, we went to church on Christmas and Easter, but didn't really go to church otherwise. I think we went a few times, but it wasn't really a core part of our family. I knew that my mom believed in God and Jesus. And so that certainly I wasn't going to be like, I believe in the hypostatic Christ. I don't.
Let me recite the Athanasian Creed and tell you exactly why.
Yeah, I've come a long way. I did go to Episcopal school. My husband, who was an Anglican priest, he would tell you that it was a school in the Anglican tradition because I don't know. I mean, there was a priest there. He wore a Hawaiian shirt and didn't really do services. So I left the Episcopal school from preschool to 8th grade, not knowing what Episcopalianism was. But I knew it was Christian. And it was just, I went because it was a good school. Anyway, I went to public high school. A lot of my friends went to Catholic high school. I did not. I went to public high school. And while I was there, my best friend at the time got saved.
Good.
Many such cases.
Many such cases, yes.
I mean, I was in Southern California, and Southern California is it is the center of Pentecostal tradition, historically. Yes. I mean, Azusa Street's there. Amy Semple McPherson starts her religion there. Yep. Trinity Broadcast Network, before it was demolished recently, was there.
Was that demolished recently? I didn't know that.
Yeah, the birthday cake on the side of the 405 is gone.
Didn't know that. That's wild.
I know. Anyway, so my best friend got saved and we were in art class and she invited me to church with her.
Okay.
And I said no, because no. And she was like, well, it's for youth group and we're going to go to McDonald's first and it's a lot of fun and there's nice people. You should come. And at that time, it seemed like everyone at my high school had been saved in recent time.
It was going around. There was something in the water. Maybe it was Jesus or the Holy Spirit, but okay.
Maybe. Maybe. I mean, it was interesting, though, because half of everyone who was getting saved was going to Compass Bible Church, which was very reformed.
Oh, okay.
And the other half was like, I don't know, becoming Pentecostal. And so the Reformed one seemed a little intense. And I also had no idea what that meant. And so I went to youth group and everyone was really nice. And I had no idea what Foursquare was.
Right.
It was a youth group for the International Church of the Foursquare Gospel, founded by McPherson. I, at one point, really loved her, which we can talk about.
We should talk about her a little bit, because I think it was at your recommendation I read that biography of her, which was maybe one of my favorite reads of the entire year. Like, one of my favorite books I've read in a very long time.
If you're
such a crazy story.
If you're interested in like the anti-communism of the 1930s, and also like everyone makes an appearance, a staged kidnapping to collect a ransom, a drug overdose, like if you're
and to have an affair, right? She like stages her kidnapping to both collect a ransom, but also to cover up an affair.
Also, first woman on the radio.
Yeah, it's
very first mega church.
Yeah.
Like, anyway,
it's a story. The book is called Sister Sinner. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's very good. It's like I was like texting you. I was like, what the? She did what?
It's really good. It's also not the story I heard.
Are you saying they had a different narrative in the?
For any like Mormon listeners, I got the correlated version. Amy.
Right.
And so I joined. I was baptized in the ocean. It was so cold. It was I don't remember. It was an adventure. My head didn't go all the way under. I did wonder if that counted, but I was fine. Anyway, that was great. The Foursquare Church historically had a really strong emphasis on speaking in tongues as kind of a marker of your salvation.
Yeah.
And I never could do that.
Yeah.
And so it's weird to be part of a religion that you don't know if it's going to help you get to heaven.
Right.
And that was hard.
Yeah.
So that was always a struggle. I remember I wanted to go on a mission trip, and on the form you had to put the date of your water baptism and the date of your Holy Spirit baptism. And I didn't have that second one.
Oh my gosh.
And so I couldn't, you can't go.
You can't go if you haven't spoken in tongues, you can't go on the mission trip.
I talked to youth leaders, and they were kind of like, because you definitely couldn't work in ministry with the Foursquare Church if you didn't.
Okay.
And so, they weren't going to hire you to be a youth pastor. They weren't going to, that wasn't going to happen. And so there was some question of are missionaries required? Anyway, so I dropped it. It was weird though. And I remember, and I don't want to disparage the good people of the International Church of the Foursquare Gospel.
Sure. No, that's all right.
But I ended up going to the Foursquare convention, which I loved, because there was a big cutout of Amy, and her gospel car was there, and it was so cool.
Amazing.
But everyone did this thing where they're like, we are Foursquare. And I was like, I don't think I'm Foursquare. I was like, this might not be me. And so
what if I don't?
What about this? Right? I also had a difficult experience at camp. I went to Foursquare camp, and everyone got saved, and then everyone's speaking in tongues, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing here.
Now, a quick note for anyone who didn't grow up in this world. Foursquare is a Pentecostal denomination. Amy Semple McPherson founded it in the 1920s, and that book we were talking about, Sister Sinner, is worth a read because her story is absolutely wild. But because one of its defining doctrines is that speaking in tongues is evidence that you've been baptized in the Holy Spirit, and Cristina hadn't had that experience, she drifted.
So I ended up making kind of a shift to maybe I'll just be non-denominational, and that was fine for a time. But at that point, I think there was a sense of can I just choose random things? And if I can choose random things, why am I even doing this? And so halfway through undergrad, I stopped going to church, and I really kind of reevaluated. Do I even believe in God? I don't know. I think I was always too scared to call myself an atheist. That felt too strong.
Sure.
But I probably practically was. I didn't go to church. I didn't really believe anything. I was still interested in religion. And so I clearly very interested. I decided PhD.
That's as high. That's as interested as you can get.
And so, but like just kind of like flitting about of
Mhm.
I'm not really anything.
Yeah.
And that was fine. I mean, that worked. I did develop really severe existential dread. I'm in like the middle of this like crisis of faith. Also,
Yeah.
like I guess I'll study religion for the rest of my life. Like
Why?
why
What could go wrong?
why am I making these decisions?
Right.
Uh, yeah.
You're in your PhD program. You've already kind of left any sort of practicing faith of any kind. And then you said you were having an existential crisis. What was that existential crisis about?
So a lot of it is I ended up being diagnosed with OCD. That's something I still deal with.
Same,
Um,
yes, as you know.
closure. And
Yep.
the earliest one of the obsessions that began very early was about the nature of the afterlife. And I became very fixated on this very particular idea of the afterlife that I like to call conscious annihilation, which
Yep.
is a vision of the afterlife where I have been annihilated, but I am aware of it and no one else has.
Oh my gosh, I haven't heard of that one.
It's I think I made it up.
Oh, okay. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, so it's like that actually is that's a torturous hell.
Yeah,
That is
that's awful. Yeah.
yeah, I have been annihilated. Somehow I know that.
Yeah.
Um, and I tried to see a therapist in my grad program,
Uh-huh.
and I don't in the worst luck possible. Like she was beautiful, and she had
Oh,
this
dear.
lovely family, and
Yeah.
she was very involved in her church,
Yeah.
and probably was not the right fit for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I became really fixated on that, and I really kind of
Mm.
existentially spiraled
Yeah.
for like I would just sit in the evening and think about death in that way.
Wow.
And then it would be like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And it was hard to explain that I was never suicidal. It was actually the opposite. I was so afraid to die
Yeah.
because of this vision I had. But of course, if you go to a therapist and you say, I'm really fixated on death,
Thinking a lot about death lately. Yeah.
yeah, it's not,
Right.
but it was actually quite the opposite. And so I was dealing with that.
Hmm.
Um, but I also was like, I don't believe in anything. So
Right.
there's nothing to
Right.
do with there's no
Right.
outlet. There's
Right.
no outlet. Like it's just fear. And
Ugh.
people can like tell you like, but Jesus, and like, okay, I don't believe in that.
Right. Oh my gosh, that sounds terrible. That image, conscious annihilation, is pretty intense. It's not that she didn't believe in an afterlife exactly, it's that she had invented one. And it was terrible. And also, it describes the kind of existential dread that accompanies a loss of meaning in a way that I find genuinely striking. Like there's nothing. And you know there's nothing, but no one else does. And you're just kind of there in the nothingness of it all. And then you discovered Mormonism and were like, oh, there are weirder people. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I was I became really interested in the 19th century.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman who became my advisor, she did a independent study with me on American communal utopias. So like 19th century communitarian movements. And she assigned Rough Stone Rolling,
Okay.
the biography of Joseph Smith.
Yes.
I read it within a day or two.
Really?
I couldn't put it down. I mean, I've used the language. I became captivated by Joseph Smith. What is this? Like, what do you mean a restoration? And what's going on here? I never joined. I never signed on. But
were you ever tempted to join?
No.
Okay. That's fine.
I mean, I think because I didn't really know if there was a God in a material form.
Right, right.
A lot of the kind of like particulars of 19th century Mormonism, it would have been too many leaps for someone like me. Right. And so, I mean, if you're taking someone who doesn't know if there's a God, having them jump from, I don't know if there's a God to there is a God with a body of matter who probably is married. You are one of his spirit children. He maybe lives on the planet closest to the sun, cold call. I couldn't do it. That was never
right.
It was never gonna
that wasn't gonna work. Yeah. Yeah.
That was never gonna happen for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so no, but I signed up for Institute so that I could meet a Mormon.
Sure.
And it was great. I mean, they were very nice. But
Yeah.
I remember then they invited me to church to one of their YS words.
Uh-huh.
And I had it was deeply disappointing. And it wasn't disappointing because it was boring or because anything. It was disappointing because it wasn't the 19th century. And you go in, and I mean, it's perfectly fine, but no one told me about polygamy or about that maybe Adam is God or that maybe we should gather into the Council of 50 and move west. Like no one talked about that. And so it was disappointing. And then I ended up finding those Mormons in the Mormon fundamental
in fundamentalism, right?
And so that's ultimately why I studied Mormon fundamentalism, is because they really reflected what initially captured my interest about Mormonism broadly. But my own kind of reevaluation of my own religion happened around the same time I discovered Mormonism, because I had to take my doctoral exams. And my doctoral exams, my major field was going to be American religious history. I decided I'm going to study the Mormons. And we were trying to figure out, what is my minor field going to be and what would make most sense. And so we decided, because of the idea of a restoration, because of a lot of the themes, that my minor field should be history of Christianity, which I was not super excited about, because reading old Christian sources seemed so boring. And so I got my exam list, and it starts with like Eusebius of Caesarea and goes to like modern Christianity in China. I think there was something did pique my interest of Christianity's old. It's not Amy McPherson. Like there's something kind of bigger than Sister Amy. And that was interesting, but I didn't really think too deeply about that. I was mostly just really fixated on the content of the sources.
And then she got to the early modern period, the Reformation, and something happened that she did not expect.
I read a book called Christ's Churches Purely Reformed, A Social History of Calvinism. It was a large book, and I started reading it, and it got to the Radical Reformation, which we have talked about.
Neither of us is a huge fan.
And there was one part in particular that really stood out to me. There was a scene of the Radical Reformers in Zurich under Zwingli, and they stormed a church and they gouged a statue of Mary's eyes out. And then they stripped all the art, and they took the Eucharist, the hosts, the communion, out of the tabernacle, and they started feeding it to their dogs and laughing and saying, "If you are Christ, save yourself." And I became viscerally angry at this. But I was like viscerally angry. I was angry that they hurt this statue. I was angry at them like desecrating hosts. I don't even know what a host is. But I was so mad.
She's a functional atheist. She doesn't believe that Mary is the mother of God. She doesn't believe in the host. She doesn't even know what a host is. And she's furious for some unknown reason. And I think she would tell you that this is not a coincidence, she got on a cruise ship.
And in a perfect storm, like probably the, divine intervention, it just so happened that I had planned a cruise to the Mediterranean. It was like on sale. It was great. And I was actually engaged at the time. And I went with my family to Europe. And I finished this book, and I got on a cruise ship that halfway through the cruise landed in Rome.
Okay.
And, I get off the boat. I'm like, well, we get our ticket to not a ticket. Like you have to get like a pass to the Sistine Chapel. And I go to the Sistine Chapel, and I'm like, well, this is cool. What a ceiling.
Very pretty. Good job, artists.
I love art. And it was, of course, it was spectacular. And so I was like, I don't know, instead of the Colosseum, why don't we wait in this scorching heat for like 5 hours to go inside the big building, whatever that is. And so we got in line to go inside St. Peter's Basilica, the Vatican. And it's a long line. And I walked in, and there was the Pietà, like a statue of it. And then you go to the front, and there's this like huge, like the Bernini canopy and the altar. And there's this little sign that says, "Here lies Peter, the first pope." And I was like, well, there he is.
There he is.
There he is. There's the first pope. And then of course you like make a left-hand turn or something. I don't have a concrete memory, but there's like a marble wall that has the name of all the popes. And I was like, well, what? There it is. It's right. It's literally in stone.
They've been, right.
It's in stone. There it is.
Right.
Done.
Right.
And I was like, this is it. This is why I was so angry at the reformers. Like, this is why I was angry, because this is what they came after. And it was just such a jarring moment. And the person I was with, my fiance at the time, who was also largely agnostic, had also come out of the Foursquare Church. He was like, you don't really believe this. Like, what do you, come on, this is Catholicism.
Right.
And in my mind, I was like, I don't actually think I've ever believed anything more in my whole life. And then there was a first pope, and he's right there, and it's Peter. And I'm going to sign up for this. And so I had emailed even before we left, the cathedral or the basilica that my grandmother had gone to. And I asked, like, how does someone become Roman Catholic? And so the woman who runs RCIA, or now OCIA, the program to become Catholic, she emailed back, Eileen, and she was like, great, we start in September. And I was like, what? And so I signed up for OCIA, and I went through the classes, and I was received into the Roman Catholic Church the following March. And that was 10 years ago this Easter Vigil.
Well, congratulations. That is wonderful.
Wild.
That is wonderful.
Still Catholic.
It's a pretty remarkable conversion story. So, of course, I had to ask, did it resolve all your existential dread?
I mean, the honest answer is no. I think that's something that I probably would have wanted someone to hear, that all your problems go away.
When you, yeah.
And that is something a lot of people hear. It's a reason why a lot of people do join, because they're told that. But joining a religion doesn't actually solve all your problems.
So true.
And I'm grateful that I was formed in that. That people in OCIA and RCIA, like what it was RCIA at the time, the rite of Christian initiation for adults. No one made it seem like your life will be shiny and new at the end of.
Right.
And I appreciated that there was an honesty to. Yeah. There wasn't this grand promise. I mean, the grand promise is reception into the church, and you'll get that, and that can be promised to you. But everything else, it's like your OCD is not going to go away.
No, it doesn't. It's not a cure, right?
Right. I think it gave me language to talk about it. It certainly gave me a community to talk. It gave me spiritual leaders that I think were better equipped than what I had as a Foursquare person. And it gave me a long tradition of people who I could look to, who had been through similar things.
Yeah.
And so that really is what the church gave me.
I relate to this. My own existential dread isn't gone, but Cristina spells out how the tradition makes a difference. She has a language for it, a community of people who have faced such challenges before, and a tradition old enough to bring some wisdom to bear on it all. Okay, so that's Cristina's story, which is lovely as it is. But Cristina is also a historian and a theoretician, so she has some big picture thoughts about what was going on for her and how it maps onto larger cultural phenomena that are taking place in the contemporary West. But tell us a little bit more about enchantment or disenchantment or re-enchantment, kind of where is that coming from in the discourse?
Yeah, so I mean, generally, the way that 19th and 20th century social scientists viewed the world, and I think there's truth to it. I'm someone that would say I think there's some truth to this. That there was a time when the world was an enchanted place, when there was angels and demons and gods, and you got to participate somehow in that the natural order, you were ruled by things outside of you. And that there were institutions that were able to help you channel that. We don't have that anymore. And disenchantment is an idea the idea of disenchantment and re-enchantment is an idea to try to make sense of secular modernity, that we live in a world that is very different than the 14th century. And a lot of that is because we have gone through vast periods of Reformation. I mean, the Reformation really is an early kind of reasoning for this. Reformation, Revolution, Enlightenment, all of these things raise questions about what are we and what is the world. When I was teaching humanities, I would tell my students often that the Reformation people began to ask the question, do I need a pope? And that led to a second question that the revolution responded to of, if I don't need a pope, do I need a king?
Mm.
And then from there, the Enlightenment asked the final, very difficult question of, if you don't need a pope and you don't need a king, do you need a god? There's various answers to this. I mean, these are broad strokes.
Right. I mean, right,
broad
of course. Yeah.
But disenchantment was ultimately the response of, maybe the modern world is largely materialist, focused on materialism. Maybe the individual is the primary authority and the primary kind of focus of society. Maybe we don't need a spiritual world. And in many ways, I do want to note that in many ways, this is very helpful.
Yes.
A good example is medicine.
Yes. Yes.
My husband was come from a Mennonite background, and his grandma knew and still kind of talked about the charm that Mennonites used for burns, where you would say, out with the fire, in with the frost, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, and that would cure your burn.
Also, it might not actually cure your burn.
You can use aloe vera. We have creams.
The good Lord saw it.
This is right. I mean, disenchantment. One is a very enchanted world of that you use a charm, but the other is a world of maybe materialism is kind of where we should be focusing our energy. And so that's true. So I do want to note that to not make a caricature of this, that there are ways that this has been very helpful. I mean, I know that there was a period in the Middle Ages where people would put the Eucharist on their farmland and that would make it grow. We use fertilizer now.
Right.
And that's fine.
Right.
And so there are ways that's helped, but there are also ways that it hasn't. And I think the kind of key person who really first really thought about this was Emil Durkheim.
Okay.
And he wrote a book on suicide. Coined the phrase anomie, which is a feeling of being displaced and unmoored. And I mean, for lack of a better word, of feeling suicidal, a feeling what if we completely disentangle the faith from everything? Then what is your culture? What is art? What is intellectual curiosity? What is philosophy without the scholastics? What is art without the church? What is that? And so he was trying to figure this out. And the Romantics tried to kind of think this through.
Yeah.
Early on of the world's kind of a bummer. And so the Romantics really were, I mean, it was
right. Yeah. I mean, the world is a bummer, right? That's just reality. It just sucks sometimes. Yeah.
It is. And the Romantics looked around them and at industrialization, and there's all of a sudden child labor and black smoke in the sky. And there was a kind of early sense in the 19th century of, can we go back to something? And they were really focused on aesthetics for this and kind of the general human experience. But by now, in 2026, the world that we have inherited has largely it's almost like it's been a closed question of the world is disenchanted. And can that change? Is that good?
Yeah, no, I think, there's, I remember reading an Atlantic article. This was back probably 2016, 2017. I can't remember who wrote it, but they were talking about how sort of there had been this idea that if only everyone became a secular atheist, then there would be peace and science and, classical liberalism would reign, and we would no longer have holy wars or whatever. Everyone would be these educated, enlightened secular elites, and it was that's a tiny slice of people, and then everyone else is now completely untethered from community, from reality itself, right? And it was that was always wildly over-optimistic. So disenchantment isn't bad. It gave us freedom of speech, modern science, democracy. I mean, I don't want to go back. But what disenchantment didn't get rid of is the restlessness of the human heart, which for whatever reason seems to stubbornly persist even when we're convinced it shouldn't. And so people try to re-enchant, but in more and more novel ways. Let's shift gears just a little bit. And you and I both know, many such cases of folks. They're not religious exactly, but they end up in this sort of new agey woo-woo world. What's that about? do you think?
Well, I think I am someone who's very religious.
Right.
So
Same. So
just
take
to be,
everything with a grain of salt.
yeah,
Right?
just
Knowing
to be
that. Right.
clear. I have exercised salt behind me.
Sure.
So you
right.
can use that. You can use that as your grain.
Take that as your grain.
But so I want to be clear about that, when I say that I think that humans are religious animals,
Mhm.
I realize that there are people who are going to disagree with that out the gate. But I do think that's true. My favorite line from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, it's line 1, so it's not hard to find. It's like
Mhm.
the first sentence. It's that God, infinitely perfect and blessed in himself in a plan of sheer goodness, freely created man to make him share in his own blessed life. And for this reason, at every time and every place, God draws close to man. And
Mm.
I think that's true. And I think human beings have a kind of an impulse, and I think, very religious people would say an impulse toward God, but I think at a minimum we can say an impulse toward side of themselves. I think there's language of like toward a higher power or whatever, but I think at a minimum, I think human beings do have an impulse towards something outside of them.
Yeah.
Maybe that is toward a sense of justice, like if you see something wrong and you feel compelled or to do something, or maybe it is to God, or maybe it is to just something outside of you. I think there's an impulse to that. And that, can be harnessed by religion, but it also, a lot of people, wield that and do a lot of really great humanitarian effort.
Sure.
But I think humans are compelled towards something outside of them. And I think if you come from a culture or a background that there is a weariness of authority or a weariness of high structure, or if you've been told not to trust yourself or things like that, I think it can be very easy to channel it into the myriad of choices we have. I think the downside of the kind of modern new age impulse, or not even modern, I mean, it is very old,
Right.
of,
Yeah.
of new age impulse is I think it actually does ultimately speak to some of the worst parts of ourselves. And I say that realizing that a lot of people are very captivated by these things. And so I don't want to I'm not
No.
trying to
No.
get rid of your crystals. I'm not
Right.
saying that, but I would ask people to consider if this is true for them. And what I mean by the worst parts of ourselves is I do think there's a problem with our society having gotten increasingly individualistic. And the fact that everyone can create their own individual tradition, I do think we lose a sense of integration and wholeness with each other and responsibility to each other. I think one of the things that really encapsulates modern Western society is an overabundance of choice that is almost a debilitating range of choice.
It can be, right? It's like, how
Yeah.
many flavors of jam do I have at the store? Like, that
Yes.
overwhelms me, let alone which deity.
And that you can choose of all things and everything. I think that can be I think that can be overwhelming. I think it can be challenging. And I do think it unmoors people. I think the kind of I think that can, of course, lead to a lot of problems of cultural appropriation that people definitely are familiar with. And the other one that I would suggest is I think there is, in the kind of attempt to reclaim a sense of spirituality apart from institutionalized religion, I think often the romanticization of the former and the kind of lack of interest in the latter can cause people to not be critical of very valid critiques of the kind of a spirituality outside of institutional structures. And an example I think is really pertinent is, whenever I think of like new age stuff, I think of like the quest for Shambhala and, the age of Aquarius. The worst people who've ever lived, the Nazis, were looking for Shambhala. They were deeply esoteric people.
Right.
And so I think it's worth kind of thinking through the extent to which atheistic choice that's highly individual that wants to kind of fill this void, that it can lead to like pretty rough people were doing the same thing.
Okay, so at the risk of invoking Godwin's law, the idea that as an online discussion grows longer, the probability of a comparison involving Nazis or Hitler approaches 1. Of course, Cristina is not saying everyone needs to come back to a tradition or you'll end up a Nazi. She's saying that even secular movements need deep metaphysical myths or stories in order to cohere. And some of those stories are more helpful than others. to put it mildly. So I asked her to make the pitch. You're standing outside all of it. Something's tugging. And you are absolutely not going back to the thing that hurt you. Why would you ever walk into a church?
Well, for someone who feels a pull but it doesn't know, I mean, I think the biggest one, there is no sunk cost, right? You're not, I think there can, like, I think I felt this in some way of like, can I go back? Like, haven't I? And I'm not making the case for like when people are like, you're never too sinful for Jesus. But the
Right.
sense of, I've really shaped my identity around not being Christian. And is that too, like, can you go back from that? Can you reshape an identity? Can't can you do that? And so I think the idea that there actually is no sunk cost. If secularism feels kind of thin or absent or whatever, it might just be because it is. Like it might just be that it is. And I think this was something, not to do a plug for Catholicism.
Go ahead.
But,
Go ahead.
But I think, I do happen to believe in the church I joined. I do happen to believe it. And I think, that has taken time. I have been formed by it and shaped by it and, have worked out my faith in fear and trembling. And, it is a process. But I think two of the things, aside from kind of the firm beliefs of the church, that have been really meaningful to me, that I do think people look for and in kind of new age things, but I have found in the wisdom and the tradition of the church is American people, right, are like every culture and no culture at all.
So true. Yes. Right.
Like I'm like Italian-ish and also Argentine-ish and also like English, Irish, German-ish, but like, what am I? And so I do think it gave me a tradition that I'm fully part of. And I do have Catholicism in my ancestry. And so I'm not, kind of making it up wholesale. But I think that's been something that has been a really kind of healing experience for me to have something that I'm part of that has traditions, that has foods, that is a fully sensory experience of the world. Something like the liturgical calendar has been a huge part of my experience. One of my favorite lines in the Eucharistic prayers is when the priest says, "Order our days in your peace." And that if you look at the liturgical calendar, every day has an option. And it has given a sense of, it's organized the world in a way that gives it meaning and gives it value and gives it beauty. I think the other thing that the church offered that I think is appealing in the New Age and in kind of spiritual but not religious, I think one of the reasons I was so angry at the Radical Reformation is they were iconoclastic.
Right.
I love the stuff of Catholicism.
Sure.
Like, I love the stuff. I love the stuff. I love that Catholicism is like Catholics are a kitschy people.
Yeah.
Give me more pastel statues. Like, I love that stuff. And aside from, that kind of stuff, like statues and everything, because I do love the art and whatever, is the idea of the sacraments of the Catholic Church. So what we would call the outward and visible signs of an inward and invisible grace, that the way that we practice the faith through doing things with our body and with other people in particular ways has been very meaningful to me. Especially, I think, I think there was something really significant the first time I ever went to confession and I heard a priest say, "I absolve you." And I was like, it's not just me having to wonder, that I never had to wonder, am I part of the church? Because I was confirmed. I was sealed with oil. It's a tangible thing that I'm part of. I don't have to wonder, did it happen? It happened. I did it. I appreciate that there's stuff that the church teaches that matters. One of my favorite lines or quotes, I guess, comes from St. John of Damascus. And he was talking against the iconoclasts. And he says, "I do not worship matter. I worship the God of matter, who became matter for my sake and deigned to inhabit matter, who works out my salvation through matter." And so the church gives me...
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, he's great.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, he's great. And so and that's why he's saying, he's like, you don't get to break icons because God became an icon of the invisible God.
Right.
So stop it.
Right.
And so I do like it gives me a tangible that I think a lot of because I'm someone who's very in my head. I mean, I was an academic.
Totally.
I like rational arguments, but that the church gives me tangibles. And they're not tangibles that I have to I'm responsible for making up. They're things that have been passed down that have kind of a rich history, a rich tradition. And so I think those two things of being part of a tradition that has a material culture that is really significant, but also having a tradition that orders my days in God's peace I think those are things that I wouldn't have been able to make up or figure out on my own.
Yeah, I love that. And I do think I think there's a reason that traditions like Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, because of the kind of, beautiful aesthetic and liturgical traditions, why those are getting, folks kind of converting. I would put in a plug as well for traditions like Lutheranism and Anglicanism or Episcopalianism that also retain a lot of the liturgy, a lot of the calendar, a lot of the kind of church season. You can find congregations that have varying levels of, how, quote, high or low those are, depending on sort of what aesthetics might move you. But I do think there's a reason why even non-denominationalism has seen some a not insignificant number of people turning to the more sensory traditions.
Oh yeah, and I mean, to what you said, just as a reminder, like I did marry an Anglican priest, so no shade.
No, of course, right? Yes, of course, of course. Right,
I mean,
right. You single-handedly healed the divide in the Western Church. I mean,
you're welcome. I mean, obviously, I'm friends with you, Katie.
Right. I mean, right. I know it's a sacrifice and a stretch, but I'm very grateful.
Favorite Lutheran. You're my favorite Lutheran.
You're my favorite Roman Catholic. Don't tell any of my other Roman Catholic friends. Stop listening, Father Dylan. I always ask my guests the same final question. Well, this has been wonderful. Just really appreciate your time today. Maybe just to sum up or kind of wrap up, what does faith after faith look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm really grateful to be part of a religious tradition that feels like a seemingly never-ending well. And so I'm grateful for that. It's also a tradition, like I mentioned, I happen to believe is true. But I think faith after faith initially, and still, but really initially, it meant choosing to believe and choosing to be part of it. And just, yeah, I mean, faith is a choice as much as it is anything else. And so for me, that was a huge part of it, is that I made a choice to be a Christian.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being with me today. What I keep coming back to from this conversation is the way human nature wants something to stake its life on. Augustine said it beautifully, "Our hearts are restless, O God, until they find their rest in you." I don't think he's making a dogmatic statement there. I think he's describing something fundamental about the human experience. If you're in the middle of all this, if you're restless for something, Cristina is not saying you have to become Catholic. She's saying notice the reaching. Take it seriously. Ask what it's pointing toward. Because the reaching, I'd argue, is a clue to where we might ultimately find meaning and hope. Now, if you want the full uncut interview with Cristina, including some genuinely fascinating conversations about Mormon fundamentalism, that's available for subscribers at katielangston.com/podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please rate and review us in your favorite podcast app or like and subscribe on YouTube. It really does help. And of course, the biggest compliment you can pay is to share this podcast with a friend. Until next time, I'm Katie Langston. Thanks for being here on Faith After Faith.